is a human race issue for George Floyd and all the people who have come before him.
We can change the way that we look at people. We can change the way that we look at African American men, that they are not a threat and they are human beings. We have to treat them like they're human beings.
And the crowd has been shouting, Black Lives Matter, no justice, no peace, and I can't breathe. Right now you're looking at live pictures of the crowd and the police line there. Lots of Secret Service, Park police officers, federal officers. And we can tell you, we have seen them moving around. There is a lot of law enforcement out here. So we're going to stay out here, keep an eye on this. But like we said, everything has been peaceful. And obviously, we all hope it stays that way. Reporting live in Lafayette Square, Tim Barber, ABC 7 News.
Yes, we do. Tim, thanks very much. And a curfew, we can tell you, is in place right now in Richmond after 2 nights of violent protests there. The curfew is in effect from 8 o'clock tonight until 6 o'clock tomorrow morning, and that's going to continue every night until further notice. Governor Ralph Northam also declaring a state of emergency across the Commonwealth in response to the escalating violence. The declaration allows the Commonwealth to mobilize resources, including the Virginia National Guard, if needed.
Now, last night, protests and demonstrations turned into destruction as the night went on. We were there as flashbangs, car fires, even a fire set near the historic Hay Adams Hotel happened right behind us. ABC 7's Heather Graff continues our live team coverage with the plan that law enforcement has for the night ahead. Heather.
Well, hi, Carl. And I think one thing we've seen so far today, with the crowd being this large, the scene really varies depending on where you're standing, even from where Tim is standing to where I'm standing right now. So let's show you what we're seeing. We're standing on the sidewalk here on H Street Northwest, kind of looking into Lafayette Park, and pretty calm right now. We're seeing a lot of signs that say Black Lives Matter. Many of them also simply say his name, referring to George Floyd. A much calmer scene than we saw last night. And we do want to show you some of the video that our crews shot last night. We can tell you both Mayor Muriel Bowser and Police Chief Peter Newsham said they absolutely support the right to peacefully protest. They recognize and even empathize with the outrage that many are feeling, but they said they cannot allow people to hurt others or to destroy property like we saw last night. 29 Metropolitan Police cars were damaged, 11 officers received non-life-threatening injuries, and 17 people were arrested on charges ranging from rioting to burglary to assault. Here's what the chief said about last night and his plan for today.
I think as we make additional arrests, and we will, it will have a clearer picture of potential groups or organized groups that were involved in this. With regards to tactics tonight, Mark, you're absolutely right. We're not going to discuss tactics because for the people who want to come to our city intent on destroying things and hurting people, we would not want to tip them off. But we will have the sufficient Metropolitan Police Department resources to manage this. The idea in these cases, particularly when you have the volatility that we had last night, is to manage it to the best degree possible.
All right, so the chief hoping cooler heads prevail tonight. This is another live look inside Lafayette Park here. And Tim mentioned that earlier, one of the tense moments that we saw was when protesters, demonstrators kind of broke through the first set of barriers. And I want to show you, so basically law enforcement had used zip ties to secure those barriers, and we saw someone come through and cut those, and then shortly after that is when we saw protesters push through this first set of barriers. One other thing I do want to talk about, referring to one of the more tense moments that we've seen today. I think it was about 5:30 when Tim was reporting that there were kind of a little bit of jostling between officers on the line and the demonstrators at the front of the crowd. I was out here on H Street, and we saw a lot of protesters wiping or pouring water over their faces and their eyes, and that's what we typically see after someone has had tear gas on them. And so we asked them what happened. They said that the police had sprayed some kind of chemical. They believed it to be tear gas. They were okay, but they said they were at kind of the front of the barrier when that happened. So that's one of the more tense moments that we've seen here today, but we've also seen a lot of calm and peaceful protesters here with a very important message. We'll leave you with one last look here at our vantage point, looking into Lafayette Park. We'll be here throughout the course of this newscast and this evening, checking back in with you guys. For now, we'll send it back to you inside.
All right, Heather Graff in Northwest Washington, thank you very much. Now, while we are seeing the largest protest in the district, that's not the only part of the area where anger over the death of George Floyd is on display. 5 people were arrested during protests last night in Manassas. Around 250 people were in the crowd at times, blocking streets. Police from nearby districts had to be called in. Several businesses suffered damage, and 4 Prince William County police officers were hurt.
Well, today, D.C. business owners, they were at their place of business trying to pick up the pieces. This is after the protesters turned into unrest late last night. ABC 7's Tobias Rodriguez spoke with a man who believes that opportunistic burglars are the ones that stepped in and stole thousands of dollars of inventory.
The dust is settling from Saturday night's protest.
People need to wake up. People need to start to take action.
Any cop that kills someone needs to be charged with first-degree murder, especially if a video is clearly deliberate what he did.
Sunday morning, the cleanup began on I Street and H Street near the White House. Storefronts shattered and spray paint sending a message.
A rebellion in many ways, and this is the foundation of our democracy.
On 14th Street, owners of Savon Liquor say their store is broken into overnight. They believe not by protesters, but by a separate group of people taking advantage of the police department's focus on the protests downtown.
After looking at the video, looks like somebody burglar type people, they're taking advantage of this situation.
In the security camera footage from the store, you can see someone break in. Owners say high-priced liquor, cartons of cigarettes, and cash were taken.
Just one after another, like people were coming in and grabbing the stuff.
Store owners say that the brick that was thrown through the front door traveled all the way through the room and landed right here.
And this thing happens, it really affects the smaller businesses like that.
Savon Liquor is fixing their door in hopes of opening on Monday. They say the break-in won't stop them from serving their customers.
To me, 2020 is hard for everybody. You know, we should not live like this.
Reporting in Northwest, Tobias Rodriguez, ABC 7 News.
We continue to follow breaking news on ABC 7 News at 6:30. A news crew attacked. A night on the job covering protests takes a turn. How this ended for journalists at our sister station.
And extraordinary measures what retail stores are now doing in major cities to try and stop looting.
Yeah, scary moments for a news crew at our sister station in Baltimore. They were confronted, as you can see here, by protesters who did not want to be on camera, although they were on public streets and public property. They tried to take the crew's camera and equipment, and one photojournalist received minor injuries in that scuffle.
Vandals also defacing several memorials in D.C. They spray painted graffiti on the World War II memorial, also spraying graffiti along the steps leading to the nearby Lincoln Memorial. And new at 6:30, attempted arson, trying to damage a police station. Why the fire started at this spot is so heartbreaking for officers.
And unrest and anger, the changes protesters are demanding, and how this unrest could change history.
You're watching ABC 7 News at 6:30 on your side.
In Philadelphia, looting at a Target. Now, we showed you this live at 5 as dozens of people are seen breaking in and taking off with boxes, full shopping carts worth of material and merchandise there. Because of looting like this, Philadelphia's mayor moved up the citywide curfew today from 8 p.m. to 6 p.m. about 45 minutes ago. Also, Target announced today that it is temporarily closing dozens of stores across the country due to the protests.
And caught on camera, an attempt to set the Fredericksburg Police Department on fire. Watch this. You can see somebody start that fire right near the sidewalk, and then those flames spread to the first set of doors. That blaze started right near the fallen officer memorial. That's the branch of their building, but it was quickly put out, thank goodness. An investigation is underway, and anyone who saw something suspicious at that time is please asked to call in a tip. All right, let's take another live look now in D.C. as the protest in Lafayette Park does continue. Very passionate, very vocal, but so far very peaceful, which is very good news considering what we've seen over the last couple of nights play out there. Very strong police presence. You have 3 jurisdictions working together. There's the Secret Service, along with the Capitol Police, and also the Washington, D.C. Metropolitan Police Department. So they have a lot of officers on hand, a lot of resources, and they're trying to protect not just the White House, but also some of the memorials and monuments out there as well.
And these are live pictures out of Chicago. You see the smoke billowing up there. That's been a theme throughout, fires and smoke popping up throughout these protests. We've seen lots of cars set on fire over the course of these protests.
And it seems from each corner of this country, protests have broken out on our streets following the death of George Floyd in Minneapolis.
From coast to coast, there are calls for calm from governors. Sinclair National correspondent Christine Frizzell now with a nation on edge.
Another day of cleanup after another night of protests, looting, and violence. a vicious cycle with no end in sight. The police presence growing, and new calls for the president to do something to calm the country. The president's latest move designating Antifa as a terrorist organization. This follows a weekend of tweets some worry have inflamed things more.
And that's not helpful. It's not lowering the temperature. It's sort of continuing to escalate the rhetoric.
What remains is a clear divide on what's at the center of the anger. First and foremost, the death of an unarmed black man, George Floyd, at the hands of a white police officer who we now know had at least 17 misconduct complaints filed against him previously, yet he still had a job. It's part of a system many on the streets have decried.
Hands up, don't shoot! I want to be able, when a cop is driving behind me, I don't have to clench and be tense.
A different take from the White House National Security Advisor.
No, I don't think there's systemic racism. I think 99.9% of our law enforcement officers are great Americans.
Among the other major world events going on right now, we are in the midst of a presidential election, and both candidates have made clear they understand this issue is front and center, on top of the 40 million Americans out of work and the global pandemic.
The death of George Floyd on the streets of Minneapolis was a grave tragedy.
Imagine having police called on you just for sitting in Starbucks or renting an Airbnb or watching birds.
Scenes like this one playing out in Michigan Saturday night of a sheriff walking with protesters, offering a sign of hope, but one that sits in the shadow of fears of continued chaos in our cities. I'm Christine Frizzell reporting.
And now we are taking a live look at one group of protesters in Miami. You can see how widespread that is. They are in the middle of the road there. Dozens, if not hundreds of people there. Demonstrations here getting rowdy, but still peaceful for the most part. We're going to continue to monitor these pictures and bring you updates on WJLA.com and the ABC 7 News app.
Also today, a history-making moment in space, the SpaceX capsule docking with the ISS. Yep, and the two astronauts getting off that small capsule and onto the International Space Station. This is the first time that a privately built and owned spacecraft carried astronauts to the orbiting lab in its nearly 20 years. The docking occurred just 19 hours after a SpaceX Falcon 9 rocket blasted off from Kennedy Space Center, the nation's first astronaut launch in nearly a decade. Congratulations.
Some much needed positive news there with everything going on, and hopefully the sunshine was able to brighten your day a bit as well. A gorgeous way to wrap up the month of May, and it's going to be a beautiful start to June as well. Let's take a look out there. At the moment, we're still seeing a lot of 70s, beautiful sunny skies, low humidity, dew points in the low 40s gives kind of a crisp feel to the air, with a northwest breeze continuing to bring in those drier and sunny conditions. So we'll stay clear through the rest of the evening and the overnight hours. We'll be falling back through those 60s. You can see around 62 at 11 p.m. and actually cooling pretty quickly from there. So something to keep in mind if you love to open the window overnight. May be a little chilly for that. I would suggest maybe just cracking it an inch or so. A lot of us are going to fall into those 40s as we start off tomorrow morning, which is about 15 degrees below normal for this time of year. If you look ahead with our Stormwatch 7 Futurecast temperature range, you'll see those 40s are more likely if you're watching north and west of the I-95 corridor. The rest of us more likely to wake up tomorrow in the 50s. 60s quickly returning with that continued sunshine, and as we head into tomorrow afternoon in particular, it's going to be very similar to today. We'll have highs in the mid 70s, maybe a few upper 70s will kind of pop up there with the continued sunshine and low humidity. Now the humidity will stay low only for a couple more days, so something to keep in mind as well here. You'll notice Wednesday really soaring up there. That's our next weather maker. Also could be our first 90 of 2020. We'll be right back.
Well, protests and demonstrations peaceful right now in D.C., which was a much different scene than what we saw last night.
It really was. ABC 7's Heather Graff continues our live team coverage. Heather.
Hi, Jonathan and Carl. Well, we've crossed the street again. We're now standing on the other side of H Street Northwest. And even from across the street, we can hear the chants coming from Lafayette Park as this crowd of demonstrators chants Black Lives Matter. We've seen a lot of signs that bear George Floyd's name. And also here in H Street, people holding signs. You can see this one says arrest, charge, and convict the accomplices. I asked this young man, he said the accomplices refers to the other officers involved in the George Floyd incident. We know that one officer has been charged at this point. All of the officers involved have been fired, but so far protesters would like to see every officer involved in the death of George Floyd to be charged. The sign next to his, no justice, no peace, and that is a message we've heard a whole lot over the last few days. But again, for the folks we've been speaking to, this is not a new issue. They've been calling for change for years now, and they say it's overdue. And that's why we're seeing this unrest in this city and so many others across the country. We'll send it back to you inside for right now.
Yeah, lots of frustration out there. Heather Graff, thank you very much.
And we continue to monitor what's going on all across the country. In fact, these are live pictures now from WCCO, which is Minneapolis. They had a very huge, peaceful protest that was going on in St. Paul, which is right across the Mississippi from Minneapolis, why they call it the Twin Cities. And so what we understand is the protesters, after they were done at St. Paul, they began a march, thousands of them, walking across the 35W heading toward Minneapolis. We believe that that's what we're looking at now, that the major roadways there have been shut down so that the protesters can make their way across. This is a smaller smattering of protesters. We at one point saw thousands of them, like a congested group that were walking together. We continue to watch what's happening. Some of the protests we've seen today are peaceful. In other cities, we have seen violence, cars on fire, and looting. We'll continue to follow all of it. We'll have more right after this.
Welcome back. We leave you with pictures out of Miami here. You see the protesters walking in the middle of the street. We're going to continue to watch this all across the country.
Yeah, there are cities all across our country with these kinds of protests. We'll stay on all of it for you, and we'll see you back here tonight at 11 o'clock with the very latest. Have a good night.